My daughter's fiancé called me a burden. He laughed at me, said I was dragging her down, and then he was on the operating table, and I was the only one who could save his life. Subscribe to the channel if you want more stories like this. Write in the comments, would you sign the papers? Be sure to write where you're watching this video from. I'm interested. I remember the exact moment he first walked through my door. It was a late Sunday afternoon, the kind where the sun hangs a little lower in the sky, and the air smells like warm earth and quiet regrets. I had made sweet tea with mint from my garden and baked the cornbread just right, golden brown on top, soft in the middle. That's how I greet people. With food, with effort, with welcome. I stood on the porch, wiping my hands on my apron, when Tiana's car pulled up. My daughter, my heart, stepped out in her navy pantsuit, even on a Sunday. Always polished, always on time. And then he followed. Tall. Too tall. Skin the colour of roasted almonds, and eyes that darted like they were always scanning the room for something better. His shirt looked more expensive than my mortgage ever was. The buttons gleamed. The watch on his wrist could have paid for half the street I live on. But it wasn't the money that caught my attention. It was the chill that came with him, like he brought air conditioning wherever he went. I smiled naturally. That's what I do. I smiled and said, "Welcome." And he didn't even look me in the eye. "Pleasure to meet you, ma'am," he mumbled, brushing past me with a quick nod. That was it. No handshake, no real smile, just a formality, like signing for a package you didn't order. Inside, I tried to act normal. I brought out the cornbread, the gumbo, the collard greens. He didn't touch the cornbread, pushed the greens to the side, picked at the shrimp in the gumbo and asked if it was farm-raised or wild-caught. I said, "I caught it from the freezer, baby." He didn't laugh. Tiana did a little. Over dinner, he started asking questions, the kind with teeth. "So what do you do to stay busy, Miss Williams?" he said. "I garden. I teach piano to some neighborhood kids. I read. I rest. I listen." He tilted his head like I was speaking another language. "That's nice. My mother would go crazy if she didn't have a calendar full of things. She runs a charity foundation and volunteers on the city council." I smiled again, a slow one. Well, I did 40 years of calendars. Maybe rest is my reward. He didn't reply. Later, when Tiana got up to wash her hands, he leaned back in his chair and gave me a look like I was a pop quiz he didn't study for. "You've got quite the old-school charm," he said. "Old school's held up better than new money," I replied. Still no smile from him, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth that looked more like a sneer. That was the first night. He didn't touch my hands when we said goodbye. He didn't offer to help with the dishes. And when he stood beside Tiana at the front door, I saw how he placed his hand on the small of her back. Not lovingly, not protectively, but like she was an object he owned. I didn't say anything then. Not to him, not to her. I sat on the porch after they left and listened to the crickets and the way my bones whispered to me in the silence. Something ain't right. But maybe, I told myself, I was just being overprotective. Maybe it was my age talking. You get older and you start to see ghosts in every corner. My daughter was happy. That's what I wanted, right? The second visit was worse. He brought wine, not flowers, not pie. Wine. Said it was from some vineyard in California I couldn't pronounce. When I thanked him and went to put it away, he chuckled and said, "You might want to let it breathe. I doubt that cabinet's the right temperature." Tiana shushed him gently, but he brushed it off. "No offense," he added, turning back to me. "I just like things done the right way." That night, he talked a lot about himself, his work in corporate finance, his plans to open a startup, The time he met a senator on a yacht. He talked about how outdated marriage was while holding Tiana's hand, and how families were evolving beyond traditional hierarchies. Hierarchy? I said. You know, he replied, the idea that we owe something to people just because we share blood. I looked him straight in the face and said, blood's the reason you get to walk. Love's the reason you come home. He rolled his eyes. I saw it. A full, unapologetic roll of the eyes, and then he reached for his wine and changed the subject. After they left that night, I stayed up late rereading some letters my late husband had written me during our early days. He always said, trust your first feeling. God's voice sounds a lot like intuition when you've lived long enough. My feeling? That man didn't love my daughter. He wanted her. That's different. Wanting someone means you're interested in the idea of them, how they look on your arm, how they speak in meetings, how they soften your image. Loving someone means you protect their soul, even when it's inconvenient. On the third visit, he was left alone with me for 10 minutes while Tiana took a work call outside. 10 minutes was all it took. He stood in the kitchen, leaned against my counter like it was his, and finally looked at me. Really looked at me. Not with warmth, with calculation. I'm going to be honest, Miss Williams, he began. I think your daughter's too close to you. It's unhealthy. She's 35. Time to cut the cord. I wiped my hands on a towel and said nothing. He continued, she tells you everything. You're always around. She needs space to grow. She needs to stop feeling responsible for your feelings. You mean for her mother's feelings? I asked, quiet. I mean exactly what I said. He stepped closer. You're a smart woman, I can tell. But you've lived your life. Now it's our turn. I'm not here to play house with your past. I looked up at him. I didn't blink. I didn't invite you to play anything, I said. You're here because my daughter sees something in you. I'm still looking. He smiled at that. Not kindly. The kind of smile people give when they think they've won. You'll see it soon, he said. And when she chooses, it won't be you. That night, I started writing in a new notebook, just a few sentences. He's not a man. He's a storm with a smile. I won't stop the rain, but I'll build a roof. For her. Always for her. Every storm runs out of rain eventually. I told myself that. And when it did, when the skies opened and showed their true color, I needed to be ready. Not to fight, but to endure. He became a constant. Not like sunrise, dependable and warm. No, he became like background static. Persistent, unwanted, difficult to ignore. He started showing up without warning. Sometimes I'd be watering my roses and see his car parked outside my gate before Tiana even arrived. He never called first, never asked if I was available. Just appeared, like the weather, like he had every right. Tiana said it was because he wanted to get closer. I smiled when she said that. She was glowing like someone in love, and I remembered that glow. I remembered having it once too. It was a delicate thing. Easy to stain, easy to steal. He tried to charm me. I could see the effort, though it never reached his eyes. He brought expensive pastries once, from a bakery in Buckhead. These are vegan, gluten-free, and refined sugar-free, he said, setting the box down like a trophy. I said, so there's sadness in a crust. Tiana laughed out loud. He didn't. I just thought you might want to try something different, he said, his jaw tight. I thanked him anyway. I'm too old to argue over dessert, but I still made my sweet potato pie the next day and left a warm slice on Tiana's porch with a little note. Some things don't need improving. It wasn't the food, it was the air between us that changed. Tiana started calling me less. She used to phone every night before bed just to check in, sometimes to tell me something silly about her day, Now it was once every few days. Sometimes she didn't call at all. When I asked, she said, "Oh, Mum, I've just been so busy. Work is insane." But I knew it wasn't just work. It was him. I could feel it like an ache in my knees before rain. One Sunday, she didn't show up for our regular breakfast. No call, no message. I waited. I made her favourite, cheddar grits and scrambled eggs with chives. I set the table. I wore the earrings she gave me last Mother's Day. She didn't come. She texted at noon. "Sorry, we overslept." Justin didn't want to get up early. Rain check? No apology, no explanation, just a rain check. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I went to the back porch, sat down, and tried to remember the last time I missed a breakfast with my mother. Couldn't recall one. A week later, I confronted her gently. I chose my words like stepping stones across a river. "I miss you, baby," I said. "You're busy, I understand. But don't let love turn into a cage." She sighed. "Mama, I'm not in a cage. Justin just wants us to have more privacy, that's all. He says I'm too dependent on you sometimes." I blinked. "Too dependent?" "Yes. I mean, I do talk to you about everything. Maybe he's right. Maybe it's time I raised a hand. "You never need to apologize for loving your mother, and you should never have to choose." Her eyes welled up for a moment, but just as quickly she blinked it away. "He's not trying to separate us," she said softly. "He's just trying to build something of our own." Something in her voice sounded rehearsed. Not like her. And that's when I knew. He was planting roots in her head. Quiet ones. The kind that wrap around your thoughts when you're sleeping. He didn't want her to love him. He wanted her to choose him. Over me. A month passed. He took her away for the weekend without telling me. When she came back, she was tired, distracted. I asked how the trip was. "Oh, it was fine. Relaxing," she said. But her eyes told a different story. Then came the invitation I didn't receive. There was a charity gala her firm was co-sponsoring. I'd been to those before. She always brought me. Always wanted me to wear my blue dress, the one with the silver buttons she said made me look like royalty. This time she didn't mention it. I found out from our neighbour, Mrs. Rollins, who saw her name in the community newsletter. When I asked Tiana later, she looked uncomfortable. Justin didn't think it was the kind of crowd that would, appreciate an older vibe. "An older vibe," I repeated. She winced. "That's not how I meant it." "No, baby," I said. "That's how he meant it. And now you're just echoing him." She looked down at her hands. It was like losing her by inches. 1 inch a day. 1 word a week. 1 silence at a time. That night, I stood in my bedroom holding a photo of her as a little girl. She was 5, in pigtails, holding a frog she'd caught by the pond behind our old house. She looked so proud, so unafraid. That little girl would never let a man speak for her. That little girl knew her mind. But the woman she became was being chipped away, subtly, quietly, with smiles, with suggestions, with isolation wrapped in the language of love. That's when I made the call. His name was Marcus Green. He used to sit in the 3rd row of my English class back in '93. He'd been a quiet kid, always scribbling poetry in the margins of his notebook. Now he was a private investigator. Good one. Honest. He picked up on the 2nd ring. "Mrs. Williams, it's been a minute." "Too long," I said. "I need your help." I told him everything, every comment, every change in Tiana's behavior, the time he said I was an anchor, the time she said she felt like she needed permission to be with me. I told him I wasn't trying to destroy anything. I just wanted the truth. Marcus said he'd call me back in a week. He called in 4 days. "Mrs. Williams," he said, his voice heavier than usual. "I've got something." Justin wasn't even his real name. He'd changed it 6 years ago after a fraud investigation tied to a failed investment scheme. He was never charged, but he disappeared, reinvented himself, married once, briefly. The woman filed a restraining order. There were unpaid child support records in Maryland, court documents, a credit score that looked like it had been through a fire. Marcus sent me copies, all of it. I printed them out and laid them on the kitchen table like puzzle pieces. There he was. Not the man with expensive shoes and smooth talk, but the man behind the mask. A man who had failed others, lied, disappeared, and now had wrapped himself around my daughter like ivy. I stared at those pages until the words blurred. Then I placed them in a folder, labeled it, "In case." I didn't show her, not yet. She wouldn't have believed me, not while she was still under his spell. I'd seen it happen to other mothers. I'd comforted women at church whose daughters got lost in the wrong man's shadow. I couldn't pull her out, but I could be the light she'd follow back. So I waited. I kept cooking her favorite meals, even when she didn't come. I kept texting her every morning, even when she didn't reply. I kept loving her the way mothers do, unconditionally, fiercely, and with quiet hope. Because deep down, I knew this man was a storm, and storms don't last, but mothers do. The night he hit her, I was in the kitchen. I heard the slap before I heard her cry. A sound so sharp, it cut through the walls like it had a blade. Then silence. Then her voice. Small, breaking, saying his name. Justin. I didn't wait. I walked through the hallway, my breath shallow but steady. And there they were. He was standing with one hand still raised like it hadn't finished the sentence. Tiana was facing him, but her head was down, her hand to her cheek, and something in her eyes was flickering out. He saw me and froze. She didn't move. I stepped forward, slow, not rushing. I looked at his hand, then his face. "What did you just do?" I asked, barely above a whisper. He didn't speak. Tiana turned to me, eyes wide, skin already blooming red where he'd struck her. "Mama?" she said, like the word could fix it all. I walked to her, took her in my arms, and felt her bones tremble against mine. Justin stepped back. It wasn't. "She pushed me," he said, stammering. "She was yelling. I lost control. It was just a second." "A second is all it takes to change everything," I said. Tiana shook her head. "It's not what it looked like." I pulled her away, held her face in both hands. "Don't protect him." She didn't answer. She couldn't. And that was the hardest part. Not that he struck her, but that she was already trained to make excuses for him. The next morning he left before sunrise, didn't say a word. Tiana stayed in bed most of the day. I made tea, sat beside her, didn't press, just stayed close. By nightfall she spoke. "He said it won't happen again." I didn't answer. She looked at me. "You believe in second chances." "I do," I said. "But not when the first one draws blood. I'm not bleeding. Your spirit is." She didn't argue. She just turned away. That night, I sat in my rocking chair and watched the moon slide over the roof like it was trying to escape the world. I pulled out the folder again. His records, the restraining order, the debt, the false name. I placed it on my lap. For a moment, I considered marching it into her bedroom and dropping it at her feet. But I didn't. Not yet. She had to walk out on her own. A week passed. Then another's. They stayed apart for a while. She moved back in with me temporarily, claiming work was too stressful, and she needed time to think. I let her say what she needed to say. I let her pretend it was her idea. But I noticed how often she looked at her phone. I saw the guilt warring with clarity behind her eyes. She was trying to hold on to love, even if it cut her hand to do it. Then came the accident. It was a Tuesday, early evening. I was shelling peas by the window when the call came in. Unknown number. I don't usually answer those, but something in me told me to pick up. "Is this Miss Evelyn Williams?" a man asked. "Yes, it is. This is Grady Memorial Hospital. We have a patient here listed with you as the emergency contact, Justin Carter." My mouth went dry. "What happened?" "Car accident. He's in critical condition. Your daughter wasn't listed, and you're the only contact in the system. We need consent for emergency surgery. Now." I didn't think. I moved. 15 minutes later, I was in the back of a cab, folder clutched to my chest, heart pounding like a drum that had lost rhythm. The hospital lights were too bright, too white. The air smelled of bleach and bad news. They brought me into a cold little room where the surgeon explained the risks: head trauma, internal bleeding. They needed to operate immediately, and he couldn't legally consent. I looked at the paper, looked at the blank line waiting for a signature. "Can I see him?" I asked. He was unconscious, tubes everywhere, machines beeping in a language I didn't understand. He looked small for the first time, all the arrogance drained from his face, leaving only fear and flesh. His eyes fluttered open for a second. He saw me. His mouth moved. I leaned closer. "Please," he whispered. "Help me." I stood there, not speaking, just looking at him. The man who called me useless. The man who tried to rip my daughter from me. The man who hit her. And now that man was begging me to save his life. I closed my eyes, and I thought of Tiana. I thought of her in kindergarten, trying to climb a rope she was too small to reach. She looked to me with tears in her eyes. I told her, "Try again, baby. Mama's here." I thought of the birthday cake I stayed up all night baking when she turned 13, because I couldn't afford the store-bought kind. I thought of the way she used to reach for my hand in the dark, even as a teenager, when thunder scared her, and I thought of the woman she was now, smart, wounded, and still trying to remember who she used to be before him. If I let him die, would she ever forgive me? Would she blame herself? Would that be the final fracture? He groaned softly, trying to speak again. I opened my eyes and looked at the doctor. "Where do I sign?" I signed the paper. He survived. 3 surgeries. Weeks in the hospital. Tiana found out on her own. She came home from work to find me in the kitchen washing collards, like nothing had happened. "You knew?" she asked, stunned. "You saved him?" I didn't look up. "I did." "Why?" I turned to her and wiped my hands on a towel. "Because you loved him, and I love you more than I hate what he did." She stared at me for a long time, then said, "He hasn't even called." "I know." "And you still saved him?" "Yes." Tears filled her eyes. "Mama, I don't deserve you." I shook my head. "Don't say that. You were lost. That's all. But you found your way back." She walked to me, wrapped her arms around my waist like she did when she was 5. We stood like that for a long time. Justin never called, never wrote. When he left the hospital, he disappeared, like he always did, back into the shadows of his false life, his fake name, his stitched-up face. But he couldn't erase what happened. He'd come into my life trying to erase me. But in the end, it was my hand that kept his heart beating, and he would live with that truth forever. After he left, it was quiet again. Not the kind of silence that follows heartbreak or grief, but the kind that feels like breath after drowning, the kind that feels earned. It was the silence of survival, of recovery. Justin never contacted Tiana again. No call, no message, no visit. He simply vanished, the same way he had from his last life, and probably the one before that. Some men don't change, they just relocate their lies. I expected Tiana to crumble, to rage, to mourn, but she didn't. She did what I always knew she would when the weight was finally lifted. She came home. One late afternoon, I heard her car in the driveway. The same sound I'd listened for months ago with dread now arrived like an answered prayer. She didn't knock. She didn't announce herself. She just opened the screen door and stepped into my kitchen like she had 100 times before. Her face was bare, no makeup, no practiced smile. She looked younger, in a way, more honest. "Hey," she said. "Hey, baby," I replied, as if it hadn't been weeks since she'd looked me in the eye. She stood in the doorway for a moment longer. Then she crossed the room and hugged me. Not the quick, polite kind. The kind where your body folds into another. The kind where your breathing sinks. The kind where you don't let go. We stood like that, just holding each other. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all of it, for not listening, for pushing you away, for making you carry this by yourself." "You were never the weight," I said softly. "He was." We sat at the table. She told me everything she hadn't before, the control, the manipulation, the way he made her question her instincts, her memories, her worth. "I thought love was supposed to feel like surrender," she said. I shook my head. "Love should feel like home, not like walking on eggshells in your own skin." She nodded, her eyes full but calm. "You knew. You always knew." I reached across the table and took her hand. Mothers know the shape of danger, even when it's dressed in a nice suit. We stayed like that for hours, talking, crying, laughing a little too, grieving the man he pretended to be, and celebrating the woman she still was. Later that evening, I showed her the folder. I opened it slowly, slid the papers toward her. Court records, financial statements, restraining orders, receipts of his life before her. She read in silence. Her face didn't crumble. It hardened with every page. When she finished, she looked up at me. "You had all of this, and you never showed me." "You weren't ready," I said. "Truth has to land where it can grow, otherwise it just breaks things." "You saved his life knowing all this?" "Yes." "Why?" I reached for the teapot, poured her another cup. "Because if I hadn't, you might have hated yourself forever. Or me. And I wasn't willing to lose you either way." Tears filled her eyes again. "I thought he was strong." "He was loud," I said. "That's not the same thing." The next morning, she stayed for breakfast. I made cheddar grits, just the way she liked. She helped me slice peaches, her movements slower than usual, though. Full. We didn't talk about him again. He didn't belong in the clean spaces anymore. After the dishes were done, she went to the attic and brought down the old photo albums. We sat in the living room, flipping through pages, laughing at hairstyles, pointing at faces we hadn't seen in years. She paused at one photo, her, age 12, wearing a blue science fair ribbon, standing beside me in a church hallway. "I remember this day," she said. "I didn't think I'd win. I thought I wasn't smart enough." I smiled. "You were always the smartest person in the room. You just didn't know it yet." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You gave me everything," she whispered. "No," I said. "I gave you what I had. You turned it into everything." That night, after she left, I sat by the window again. The house was still. The trees outside swayed like slow dancers, old and patient. I could hear the sound of children playing down the block. Laughter. Life. I picked up my journal, the one I started the day Justin entered our lives. I flipped through the pages. So many words. So much pain carefully folded into sentences. But also resilience, perspective, witness. I turned to the final page and wrote, "He tried to make me invisible. He wanted her to forget the hands that raised her, but he didn't understand the truth. I am not a burden. I am the root of this tree. I do not cling. I hold. I do not weigh her down. I keep her grounded. I do not control. I remember." And when the storm passed, I was still standing. I closed the journal and placed it on the shelf beside my Bible. Then I walked to the kitchen and turned off the light. The house didn't feel empty. It felt full of peace, of presence, of everything we'd survived, and of the woman my daughter would continue to become, because I had stayed, because I had endured, because love, real love, never leaves. It roots and it rises. If this story spoke to you, feel free to subscribe for more. You can watch other videos on the channel. There's more to hear, more to feel. And if someone you know might need this story today, go ahead and share it.